Okay, welcome to section 7.6 on using a calculator. Really this section's a lot about order of operations, because even if you have a calculator, if you plug in the numbers in the wrong order, you'll get the wrong answer. Now a lot of you are familiar with some variation of "please excuse my dear Aunt Sally." Okay, where this represents parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, add, subtract. Now, there's two huge mistakes with this. Okay, add and subtract are actually the same step. You do not add before you subtract, and same thing with multiplication and division. Okay, because multiplication and division are actually really the same thing, and addition and subtraction are really the same thing. So you definitely do not add before you subtract. A simple example of this is 5 minus 1 plus 1. Okay? If you have 5 and you take 1 away, and then you add 1 back, you should have 5. However, if you follow these steps here on the left, you will get 5, and first you would do addition, which isn't incorrect in its own right, but a lot of people will say, 1 plus 1, and get 5 minus 2, which is 3. Now the real mistake there isn't that you added first. The real mistake is that you didn't see that this was a minus 1. Now having maybe a more clear set of order of operations might have helped you through this. So let's set one up on the next page. Okay, since we've done this before, I'm going to try and go through this quickly. Starting with parentheses, you always start with the parentheses first, and there's two big things to remember about parentheses. Okay, the first is to always start with the innermost parentheses and then work your way outwards. Okay, what I mean by that is if you have a problem like this problem here, it's impossible to really work with anything else other than starting on the inside. So intuitively this makes sense, right? Because you can't do 5 plus 3 yet, because 3 is multiplied by the parentheses. So it's stuck to the parentheses. You go, okay, well I gotta figure out then what the parentheses are. Okay, I guess you could do this 5 minus 2 here in the middle, but really you go, okay, that's 3 plus, and you have to figure out this innermost parentheses. So the innermost parentheses inside of this larger parentheses here is 2 squared minus 1. Now 2 squared is 4 minus 1, so this is 4 minus 1, or 3. So we have 5 minus 2 is 3 plus 3 is 6, and then we have 5 plus 3 times, and what was in the parentheses is now 6. And so we get 5 plus 18 equals 23. Okay, so we started with the innermost parentheses. The second thing to remember is that there can be implied parentheses, and the most common mistake for this is the division bar. Okay, I mean there's lots of other examples, but what I mean by this is if you have a problem like 2 plus 5 over 3 minus 1. Okay, what this is really saying is this bar implies that from this end of the bar to this end of the bar over here, there are parentheses above saying it's this group on top, this 2 plus 5 that's on top here, divided by this group on the bottom. Okay, and this gets people into a lot of trouble, especially with canceling out like a piece of the bottom group with a piece of the top. You know, you can't in this example, but maybe crossing out the 3 with something like a 6 up here, which you can't do because they're both part of a parentheses group. Okay, and so anyways, if you were going to solve this one right, you would get 2 plus 5 is 7 over 3 minus 1 is 2, which you could leave like that, or you could write it as 3.5. Okay, so those are my simple reminders for parentheses. Okay. Okay, next after parentheses are exponents. And there's one simple reminder, gets people in a lot of trouble. There's a lot of mistakes made this way, but just one thing that I feel like is the most important to remember. And that is that exponents will only apply to the thing to their immediate left. Okay, the most common example of this is just simply negative 2 squared and negative 2 squared. Okay? These are actually two different numbers. Okay? This one to the left is negative 1, that's that negative sign out front, times, and this 2 is squared. So really this is just negative is out front, and then over here you've got 2 squares, so 2 times 2. So this comes out to be negative, and 2 times 2 is 4. Right? Because this squared only applies to the 2. Okay? It does not apply to the negative, because really you have a negative 1 times 2, and we do exponents before we do multiplication. So that's the reason, and by far this is the most common mistake people make with exponents. And over here on the right, the thing right to the, or just to the left of the exponent is this parentheses. So in other words, the squared is for the entire parentheses, because the object immediately to its left, the parentheses. Okay, so in this case, you have the entire parentheses, negative 2, times the entire parentheses, negative 2, which is positive 4, or just 4. Okay, so two different answers, negative 4 over here, positive 4 over here. Another simple mistake that comes up, just write it over here to the side, is 2x squared, right? That is 2 times, and the x is squared, so it's 2 times x. Okay, the 2 is in no way squared in this. Alright. Okay, and the next step is just multiply and divide at the same time. Now you may say, what the heck, that's chaos. The one thing to remember then, to simplify it, if you say, well, how can I do things at the same time, is you go from left to right, just like you read a book. Okay, left to right. Okay, that's the easiest way to remember this. Simple problem is 4 divided by 4 times 4. Okay? So, if we want to do this problem with the old style, please excuse my, multiplication would come first theoretically. This is the wrong way to do it. And they would say, oh, this is 4 divided by, and you would do 4 times 4, which is 16. 4 divided by 16 is 0.25 or 1/4. When really, from left to right, this should be correctly left to right, division first, so 4 divided by 4 is 1, times 4, and so you get 1 times 4 is 4. Okay, so the correct answer here is 4, but the answer a lot of people would get for this is 1/4. Okay, now why this is true could be a subject of a whole separate video, and it's because really multiplication and division are the same thing. When you divide by a number, just like when you divide by a fraction, you're really multiplying by its reciprocal. So really this equation is, I'll write over here to the side, this is really saying 4 times, when you divide by 4 over 1, or 4, you're really multiplying by 1/4 times 4. So there's only one answer. That doesn't matter what order you do it in. Okay? So if you really wanted to do the second multiplication first, you have to say, okay, divide by 4 and times 4 is really times 1/4 times 4, and they cancel out, right? So divide by 4 times 4 should just cancel out. Okay, but it doesn't. People get 4 times 4 is 16, and the division stays there, and it gets a little messy. Again, that could be a great video. If you guys want to see that, just ask me, and I'll make a video about how really multiplication and division are the same thing. There's just multiplication. And then addition and subtraction are really the exact same thing. And really there's only addition. Subtraction is just kind of a made-up concept. Okay, finally adding and subtracting. There's two main ways you can do this, but the simplest thing to remember, if you just want to follow a set of steps, is just like multiplication and division, you just go left to right, and you won't get in any trouble that way. Okay. An example would be, okay, let's say 5 plus 1 minus 3 plus negative 2 minus negative 4. Okay? Now if somebody were to say, oh, you do, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, you do addition first, they might get in all sorts of trouble here. Okay? But if you just go left to right, you say, okay, this is 6. And then minus 3 plus negative 2. And then we can over here say minus a negative is really plus. Positive, so this is plus 4. Okay, and then we can say, oh, 6 minus 3 is 3 plus negative 2 plus 4. And then we would say, oh, 3 plus negative 2, which is really 3 minus 2, is 1. And then we say 1 plus 4, and finally we get 5. And you won't get into any trouble if you go left to right, just doing the first step and then just following that through. There are some easier steps, and I'll just show you on the next slide how I like to do addition and subtraction, which I find a little bit easier. Okay, when I'm given a problem, it's a long string of things like, 5 plus, 6 minus 2 minus negative 3 plus negative 12 minus 1, okay? When I get a big string like this, the first thing I do is I say, okay, let's get rid of all the subtraction signs that are unnecessary, like this one, minus negative. It's the same thing as plus a positive, okay? So now, let's say, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to circle all of my positive numbers in blue. So 5 plus 6, and then minusing 2, okay. Oh, and then I'm adding 3. And then I'm adding a negative 12, which is really like subtraction. And then I'm subtracting the 1. Okay, so I can collect all my positive numbers up. I've got 5 and 6 is 11, plus 3 more is 14. So in blue, I've got a big positive 14. Okay, then I'm going to collect all my negative signs. Okay, if you're just doing this in one color, what I like to use is a different symbol, like a triangle. Okay, so I've got a negative 2, I've got a negative 12, and I've got a minus 1, which is like a negative 1. Okay, so I've got plus a negative or minus, and what am I taking away here? I'm taking away 2 and 12, so that's 14, and 1 more is 15, so this is 14 minus 15. So to me, this is a very easy way to do this, and then it comes out as minus 1, right? But you could do it from left to right, 5 plus 6, and then 11 minus 2 is 9, and then 9 plus 3 is 12, and then 12 minus 12 is 0, and then 0 minus 1 is negative 1. But to me, collecting all the positives, just adding them all up at once, and then collecting all the negatives and adding them all up at once, and then just doing subtraction once. To me, that's easier. Okay? Tonight's homework, the only real difference is that you're going to be dealing with decimals. And so you are allowed to use a calculator. You just need to follow your order of operations.